Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
So Tim Cook has stated sitting is the new cancer. With standing desks becoming even more popular in the office, Apple are actually rolling it out for all their employees at Apple Park. But what's your stance on standing desks?
I've got them where I work, and they're pretty convenient. But when I changed offices from Sydney to Melbourne, they only went from having every desk with them to one in every three. So I don't always get the standing desk, but they're pretty useful. I like it. It's just a matter of you can't do it all day, every day, though.
There are those special anti-fatigue mats that people get when they're standing as well. But I was just wondering, from your perspective with coding and that, how is it actually like to do that standing? Is it any different?
No, it's fun actually. I prefer it. Mostly you have your concentration is there anyway. It's just like when you really have to concentrate and just get in the zone, sitting is definitely better. But for the bulk of the tasks, standing is just fun.
Yeah, I guess you can achieve your stand goal a bit easier with the Apple Watch.
Oh yeah, it definitely helped. But I've sort of lost motivation on Apple Watch activity lately. Maybe competitions in WatchOS 5 will help. But yeah.
Yeah, once I update with the official release, I was planning to challenge you. I wasn't sure if you're going to take me up on it, but we'll see.
Sounds good.
Okay, now, something that was a surprise to me, which it makes sense, is it turns out that the narrated intro for WWDC, which I was like, yep, that's David Attenborough, is actually Stephen Fry doing David Attenborough. Now, this totally makes sense. Of course, he's, such a well-known actor and putting on different characters' voices and everything. Totally makes sense. But I think at the time, when I was watching it live, I was so convinced that, of course Apple would get David Attenborough, that I didn't even think it could be any different. But then I said this to you, and then you then back said to me, oh yeah, no, I was thinking it was Stephen Fry the whole time.
Well, I was thinking it wasn't David Attenborough. I didn't know for sure it was Stephen Fry.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, I didn't think it was Attenborough, but I had nothing to go on, so I kind of just was like happy to leave it. But I love Stephen Fry. I don't know if you've ever listened to the Harry Potter audiobooks, but he is legendary, and he also does the Sherlock Holmes audiobooks on Audible. And yeah, I really, really enjoy his narration. It's so good.
I remember him primarily from like Laurie and Fry and all that sort of stuff that he did way back. I haven't actually quite got into the audiobooks yet, but yeah, I certainly know he does a lot. But yeah, it was a nice little surprise.
Yeah, just on last bit on him, he recently said he has cancer, so I hope everything is sorted, and given that he's working again, that he is doing well. So
yeah, that was quite shocking to hear that. Unfortunately, it can happen to the best of people. So now, speaking of something else that's impressive, is that apparently at WWDC, and I didn't quite catch this, I haven't rewatched it, but I can believe it happened. During the Memoji demo that the lady did, apparently the screen behind her went out, and in the space of 90 seconds, the team behind the screen managed to diagnose the problem, find out it was a fiber optic cable, replace that fiber optic cable, and get everything back up and running within like that lightning amount of time.
Oh my word. That is incredible.
It's amazing. Yeah. And I just, obviously neither of us were in the audience, right? So we didn't see that. And when she was doing the Memoji demo, she was kind of angled away, but I just want to rewatch it just to see if I can, see it in action. But John Gruber on Talk Show stated that he was there when it happened, and yeah, there's a 90 seconds of suspense.
Huh. That is amazing.
Now, just before we start, speaking of emoji, where is Nick's emoji?
I told you my emoji has gone to bed.
Okay.
one
It
of the
must be
cool uses-
hibernating or something.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen one of the cool uses I've seen for emoji. Well, this particular case, the guy did the characters from. Oh man, there was some like Pixar movie with all the emotions in the person's head.
Inside Out.
Yes. And I thought that was so creative. And, I was so stuck in it being like realistic. Not obviously there's only one type of nose, right? So it's like, you're not going to get exactly you, but they are lookalikes and represent good avatars. But I didn't even consider using something else. So it's actually, you can add, I think up to 50, some number like that. So it's pretty cool.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to go a little bit crazy when I actually get my hands on it. A feature such as this, which a lot of people will just pass off as, that's going to be a short-time novelty thing, that is actually kind of like the tipping point as to whether I actually go public beta or not. But unfortunately, I don't have I don't have another device I can try. I've only got the one iPhone 10, so.
Yeah. Well, before we move on, just the last thing on betas, they pulled the watchOS 5 beta from the store, or like not the store, sorry, the developer portal within hours of it originally being updated or uploaded. And then I'd already gotten in, updated, and everything was fine. And then I had, then the new build came out, and I was like, well, I don't want to be on an old build, so I'm going to get on the new build, and I don't expect anything to be different. But, this one, they've obviously signed off. So it started updating, and then it got around to like literally the last, indicator point on the update, and completely froze and didn't do anything for 8 hours. And this was overnight. And on my phone, like it just wouldn't show what the progress was. It just said checking for updates. So there's no way to bring back once your Apple Watch is bricked, it is bricked. So I was really worried about this. I love my Series 3. It's the stainless steel black one. And so, it's not something I wanted to just give up easily. But luckily, you're not supposed to restart at all. But I just thought, okay, well, it's already like, it hasn't worked in 8 hours. I've given it a fair chance. I'll try restarting and see how it goes. And, it restarted, and instead of doing the normal straight to Apple screen, it did like the software update thing again, like that progress indicator bar. And anyway, eventually I got there, but I had a really worried Saturday morning.
Oh wow, panic stations.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh no. Well, yeah. At least it worked out for you, but that is the risk for anyone. Yep. It's only developer beta for Apple Watch, and the story did spread fast of it bricking Apple Watches. So, yep, I feel your momentary pain there. So, now talking about things that are exciting, we're going to move into the product perception category. France, Germany, Canada now have HomePod. Awesome for them. So, yep, applaud all around.
I've got friends in Germany that I'm sure will be very excited about that. And again, this is one of the things that we always mention about Siri is that it is in like functionality wise, we can argue for hours on end whether Siri is up to par or not. But in terms of the sheer scale and number of languages and regions it's supported in for a wide variety of tasks, that is unmatched by certainly Alexa and, again, depending on how you weight things, Google Assistant. So it's just like, it's just great to see them adding more regions more quickly than any of the other devices have been able to do.
It's easy to draw comparisons when you're living in somewhere like US or Australia and that sort of thing. But if you're living in a country that you have Siri support, but you don't have support from the other two, then it's the type of kind of forward-thinking approach that Apple has. Okay, so as you said, yes, you can argue upon the actual functionality of it, and Siri is always improving, but because of how widespread its support is, that's really going to help a long way when they do bring out, significant new features for Siri. So, yeah, okay. Speaking of Siri-related things and the HomePod, you've gone ahead and set up HomePod stereo, so tell us about it.
Yeah, so I think, unfortunately, with the late release of AirPlay 2, and that coming quite close to iOS 12 and everything that came along with WWDC, this one sort of slipped at least like our attentions, like, or my attention anyway, and really wanting to get a good feel of it and review. So the other day, Saturday, I decided to set up my HomePod. Well, I have 3 HomePods. One of them is on my partner's account, so it kind of doesn't link to mine. But on AirPlay 2, it does. Like if I say, play everywhere, we can link that one. But
Okay.
I linked my 2 as a HomePod pair in my like sort of TV area, and I tested out the stereo sound, and it was absolutely insane. It's not just louder. It's not just louder because, to be louder, but the sheer experience of 2 HomePods is something. I've got a few Sonos, and they're pretty good with sound, but this is just absolutely incredible. We just sat for hours listening to music, having a few drinks, and just on the couch, and it was completely unmatched by any other at-home music experience I've had. Obviously, we use multi-room quite a lot, which is the other facet of AirPlay 2, and that's really convenient if you're cooking and you're walking throughout the house or getting ready in the morning, and just like generally doing householdy things. It's quite amazing. So I think the problem with HomePod stereo being so good is that it really makes me want to have HomePod stereo for every one of the ones that I already have. It's like a real serious problem. They're just, I didn't think it would be that good. So I had them set up one on either side of the TV. So that kind of gives, it's not a completely wide sound stage, but there was definitely it just all sounded like one speaker. And I think a lot of the negativity around the setup of this is that Siri only comes through one HomePod, which if they were further apart, I feel like would have been disorienting. But because I had mine relatively close together, like a meter apart, it didn't actually make a massive difference.
Okay.
And it got me thinking that it's possible that they could, update it so that Siri comes out in stereo pairs on both, but it should never come out on all HomePods in a multi-room setup, because that would just be horrendous. So I think it's just like a matter of consistency, that it's just the one HomePod that picks it up, even though both are listening. I think that's important to note. If you have one like them across the room from one another, both the mics will be activated, but the Siri spoken voice is only through one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you think that possibly via another software update, they could make it so that stereo pairs, like specifically, will have Siri through both?
Yeah, I think that will happen. But another thing that I've noticed with HomePod, and it is a limited set limited feature set Siri, but I have turned off that Hello Siri on my phone, because I actually most of the time wanted it on HomePod anyway, and it was just annoying me that it came up with Siri on the phone, and like there was only one in probably about 15 times, but it just wasn't the one that I wanted. But I do refuse to turn off Hello Siri on my iPad, because I remember wanting to upgrade to the iPad Pro 9.7 from the 12.9 because of Hello Siri support. So, the whole ecosystem, whether it's multi-room or stereo setup, Siri on the watch or on the phone, it's just become so like ingrained in my daily life now that I couldn't not have HomePods anymore.
Plus, I think with just coming along with software updates and that, they will improve the ability for it to distinguish exactly, which Siri you're wanting to set off.
Well, that's another point, because with the watch not needing the trigger phrase anymore, that's going to be a whole extra layer to that, because then if I do just want to do something on my watch, I know I don't have to speak the trigger phrase and get it confused, and that's pretty clever. It might be to the point where one day it's only Hello Siri for the speakers and the rest all know when you are speaking to Siri or not.
Maybe. What about the actual setup of it? Like, how did it
that
how
was
did you
super
go about
easy.
setting up the pair?
That was like
Yeah.
so easy. I even just didn't even think to mention it. So I just picked up the speaker, moved it over to the TV room, and then I went into the Home app and just selected the one that was already in the TV room and said, set up as stereo pair. It then came up with my other HomePod because it's the only one in that home. As I mentioned earlier, I have 2 in that home. So I selected the other one as the stereo pair, chose which one was left and right, and then that was it. It was done. And to undo it, you just unpair them and then move it back to its room, and that was it. So it's really quite easy. Obviously, they automatically tune one another. They realize how far away they are from one another and do all of that without you knowing.
It is tempting. The only thing that's holding me back from getting additional ones so I can do stereo pair is the fact that if I start playing music, suddenly my 2 little ones run out of nowhere and start yelling at Siri asking for Wags the Dog or various other Wiggles songs. So I don't know if I want Wiggles songs in stereo.
Oh, man.
But
maybe, would it not be worth your while to turn off Hello Siri on your HomePod and just use the, press in or AirPlay directly to it?
Nah. I love being able to do the commands via voice too much. Yeah. But still, that's a whole other factor. But it is very encouraging hearing your feedback on it.
They should set up more in the Apple Store with that, though, because on the Sunday I was in the Apple Store and I noticed that they were all individual, and that just didn't make any sense to me because it's really, you cannot describe it. It's just so surprisingly good that you would expect them to have that set up.
There are some stores that do have it.
Oh,
obviously
right.
Just
okay.
not, yeah. Obviously just not
I expect Chadstone to have everything. It's like it's definitely the flagship in Australia, and was one of the first around the world to get the new store design. So yeah, I just automatically naively think if Chadstone doesn't have it, no one does.
Yeah, and then potentially the Federation Square one, which is a bit of a bone of contention amongst Melburnians, but potentially
one day.
Okay, so we're going to flip out of that and straight into the rumour mill. Apple Watch Series 4, we were speculating earlier in the year about what could actually arrive with this in terms of physical differences. So Fast Company, which is a business magazine website, they did a report that apparently the side button and the digital crown are going to be replaced with touch-sensitive solid-state buttons. So think your iPhone 7, iPhone 8 home button. Now, the crown will still physically turn, but the actual button when you press in will be solid state. I guess we can just both go ahead and assume there will be a Series 4 and it will be called Series 4. But thinking more about the side button part of it, is glass the only way they could pull this off material-wise?
I'm not sure exactly around what the material limits are, but I do know that glass is like a good conductor of touch input. Capacitive, I think, is based on the electricity conduction. So I'm pretty sure that, given everything's already on glass, that's the best. But plastic certainly works.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what else would. So yeah, it would be interesting to see.
I did a quick little mock-up just for the image for this episode on our website, just replacing the side button literally with the same shape as if it were glass, and I'm sort of envisioning, say, if you had the silver body or the space black body or whatever, the glass would just sort of form like a darker shade of whatever the actual body color is. So and I was picturing maybe it could have a little stroke around it, like a thin little stroke around it to sort of further point out where the button is. Maybe I'm not sure, but it is interesting. It sort of has changed up the idea of what could they be changing physically with Apple Watch aside from the rumor of a 15% larger screen, same physical size. So I guess just quickly with the pros and cons of this. Now, people saying, this will improve waterproofing, and I get that, but the waterproofing's already damn good. And I see the pros of it being removing any issues of particles getting caught. I more had that with my crown, and not so much the side button, but hey, less moving buttons, less risk there. It could increase the internal space, so a bigger battery perhaps, and they also stated that because it has the touch sensitivity, it can gather more heart-related data. The main con for me is how does this actually affect the in-water use? Like that's one of the biggest things that I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I don't think you can say it improves waterproofing and then you can't use it in water equally. So,
it's a bit of a mystery.
Yeah, exactly. But the waterproofing, oh my God, yesterday I came across this article on the Apple subreddit. Well, not article, it was a post on the Apple subreddit where someone questioned Apple Watches Series 3s and Series 2. They have, in fact, they do have the same waterproofing, right?
Ooh, I think so.
I think they have the same waterproofing 50 meters, yeah.
Yes.
So, it's advertised. Apple has everywhere that it's water, resistant up until this level. And this guy posts like, oh, I just don't trust that it is. So I just want to hear someone say that they've done it before. It's just like, it's everywhere. It's core. He even acknowledged that they have a swimming workout and still questioned whether it was waterproof or not. And it's like Apple understates waterproofing. I know from the original one.
Yeah.
I know from the original one that was, perfectly waterproof for 10 meters or whatever. And it's just, so, I just can imagine them, if the case was that they were doing this for more waterproofing, it's just like, imagine they do that and then they get this thing to some crazy level and you just still get people on the Apple subreddit being like, has someone ever gone for a swim with the Apple Watch? Yes.
It's in the freaking advert. People are surfing with it, damn it.
Exactly. So, I don't know why they trust some random they've never met on an Apple subreddit over the company themselves.
Yeah, it's the internet for you. But I did have some issues sometimes with the Series 1 with my side button getting a bit stiff and I'd have to press it a good 10 times for it to kind of loosen up again. Haven't had that issue with the Series 3, but I can see, if you have a haptic feedback driven button on the side, it could be quite cool. And I guess it just sort of cleans up the side a bit more. But the crown's the more interesting one because there were sort of people thinking about, okay, well, this crown will turn, and then could another future Apple Watch actually have the crown is there, but it doesn't actually physically turn. It's like sensing your touch around it turning, if you know what I mean. Kind of think like iPod, the iPod style with the touch sensitivity for the Ring.
Yeah, I suppose so. But the only thing there, right, is that the actual movement of the turn is convenient. Like your finger moves, it helps your finger move along. It's not that easy to slide up and down, a hard object.
Yep.
So I don't know. I'm sure I always have faith that if Apple replaces something, it's for something better. I way prefer the iPhone 7 Plus or 7 home button compared to any other home button Apple's ever done. And so I have faith that if they do something similar, it's because this new form of a button works better. So I hope they'll figure it out.
I do love Apple's haptic feedback. They are literally, out of anyone offering devices, are the masters of that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so moving along to USB-C for iPhone. Now, might have been a year ago we discussed this, but now it's sort of the rumors are accelerating around this space. So basically, they're saying in September to expect the new iPhones to ship with a Lightning to USB-C cable and 18-watt charger. Also expected for iPad 2. This seems kind of like a no-brainer to me, and I'd love for them to pack in, that more powerful charger as well. It certainly makes sense. I already obviously have the USB-C to Lightning cable for fast charging, etc. But that's fine. That's not a surprise. The next part to this is that DigiTimes have reported that they think that the Lightning port is going to be replaced with USB-C port in 2019. Now, we've had Lightning since 2012. It doesn't look like it's going anywhere. There are some pros and cons about this, but what's your gut feeling on this? Some people saying, oh yeah, so this would be great. And other people saying, no, there's no way that Apple will shift away from Lightning, just because of how widespread it is.
At the introduction of Lightning back when the iPhone 5 was announced, Apple said they obviously had to give a good marketing message around why they were changing their port, even though competitors of theirs have changed port every 2 to 3 years. Obviously Apple doesn't have the same free reign. So they said, 30 pin got us through the last decade, and we have to replace it with something we believe will get us through the next decade. So that would put them at up until 2022. So,
Yes.
How literal they were being at that point, I really, don't know. But I don't know if there's a point on the phone where, does the port go away? Is the port unnecessary? Or do they make it more universal? And the thing, I just don't see why they would need to make it more universal after making it 10 years. They've built the whole file system and cloud system up. Yeah, I don't know. On the phone, I'm not convinced. But, on the iPad, I definitely do see some room or some potential for USB-C instead of Lightning.
I'm thinking, I have thought about this a fair bit, considered both sides of the argument, I guess. And I'm more thinking that we're probably going to have Lightning around until there's no port.
Yeah, that's what I think.
For iPhone, yeah. So that would give us at least another 5 years, I guess. Obviously, wireless charging has to come a long way and be far more accessible for them to go and do that.
They might have AirPower out by then. That would be a game changer.
Yeah. Well, AirPower Matt, but then there's also the whole idea of true distance wireless charging. So if that becomes the norm, then having no port is a no-brainer. But just a quick pros and cons. So USB-C is an industry standard. Obviously, they pushed it a lot with switching with the ports on MacBook and MacBook Pro. So this will definitely help accelerate its adoption, with iPhone being the most popular product. It will reduce cables for some people. Now, less accessories now rely on Lightning because of obviously Bluetooth and wireless charging and such. It'll help align with the Macs, which is good. And then, as you pointed out, there is some idea of USB-C being helpful for some Pro accessories or other types of things for iPad Pro. Now, the cons is, there's big user backlash with any form of change that Apple does. A Lightning to USB-C cable backlash, people are only just getting over the headphone jack, or people are still complaining about the headphone jack. So, I don't know. It's physically larger, to the eye, not by much, but to Apple, any little millimeter is a big amount of difference. Now, USB-C has leading transfer speeds, but it's nothing. The difference is nothing that's useful enough to actually warrant replacing Lightning. It's not by having USB-C you can do this. It's Lightning is plenty fast enough. USB-C just happens to be really fast. So yeah, should they or shouldn't they? I think a year ago I used to be in favor of this just because I was so pumped about USB-C on MacBook Pro. But now I'm just thinking, if they got the Lightning to USB-C cable, that's a good compromise, I reckon. And yeah, as I stated, I think Lightning's going to be around until no port is the norm.
Absolutely. I don't think it adds, I don't see how the shift to USB-C actually adds anything in the long term for that whole backlash that they would receive. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
Plus, it is actually cleaner. If you look at a Lightning cable and a Lightning port, there's nothing sort of floating around the middle of the port, right? With the USB-C port, it's got clean designs, reversible, that sort of stuff. The cable itself is a nice, neat shape, and it's quite robust. But if you actually look inside the port, you got the little board for the connectors placed in the middle of it. And I'm just picturing just someone accidentally jamming something in the bottom of their phone or breaking it or whatever. And it just, I think I preferred the cleanliness on a phone of the Lightning port. So switching it around completely to the idea of Apple's subscription service. Now, there has been reports of more and more shows that they're supposedly developing, that sort of thing, but we've kind of I've let it culminate up until now, where we've got a bit of a list to discuss. But basically, just recently, some information has come out as to looking at the possible options where Apple could offer a TV subscription service. So there's 3 options. That some or all of the original content they're working on will be free through the TV app, or an all-in-one subscription that combines Apple Music, this TV subscription, Apple Care, just one big subscription, or Netflix style, a standalone TV subscription that will actually be cheaper than Netflix. Of those three, what seems more realistic to you? And do you think we could see any preview of this as soon as September event?
Definitely standalone TV subscription seems like the most realistic.
Yep. I agree.
I think for the people who really want to pay for all of Apple's services, it's ideal to have it in one, right? Like I'd love to just have my iCloud, Apple Music, Apple TV service, whatever else they've got me locked into. I'd love for that to just be one Apple service, for whatever, like even iPhone upgrade, right? Which includes the Apple Care that you mentioned. But, iPhone upgrade program, if you just you pay one-off monthly fee to have every optimal service for your iPhone, that seems like a really good user experience. But I think initially it will just be the standalone TV subscription so that, it's just like is sold separately and people are there's not this perception that they're trying to hook you in one, giant bundle, even though for people like me, that's ideal. And I don't think September. I just think these things take longer to make, and creativity, especially if you're bringing, people that we'll discuss later on board, it takes a bit of time.
Yeah, so we had Planet of the Apps, we had Couple Karaoke, that had been sitting within Apple Music, which had always been to some people a questionable place to put it. But now it just seems so obvious that by the time they do launch something like this, it will be through the TV app, right? Like that's just where it will happen.
Yeah, definitely.
And what about the music documentary side of things, though? Could that exist in both Apple Music and TV app, or
they do already?
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
So it comes through in I watched the Courtney Barnett, and then also there's Skepta. Yeah, a whole bunch of them already show up.
Okay, cool. There's some information about some shows they're working on, and I'll let you just take this one.
Yeah.
Oprah, a huge name.
Oh, you led with it.
A deal has been made.
You led with it. I was just going to say, I don't know if she can quite lead, follow from Gary Vaynerchuk, but she'll try. So, yes, this is obviously a massive deal, right?
Huge deal, yeah.
So Apple signed Oprah for a multi-year original content deal. And the wording was they signed her to create original programs that embrace her incomparable ability to connect with audiences around the world, which obviously demonstrates that they're ramping up original content. As we've already said, Oprah is massive. She's one of the names, first people I learned about in television. She's been relevant for years and years and years, and has had the biggest interviews and the most shocking moments. And she's obviously known for being super generous and entertaining, thoughtful. And yeah, I'm really excited to see what they'll do. Obviously, Oprah also has a studio, Oprah Winfrey Network, and has she's a massive name, has a O magazine and does a lot of work in South Africa. So just for me, it's just really exciting to see someone so, I think she's awesome and has done a lot and achieved a lot. And just to see, obviously a brand that I love and admire working with people that I respect and admire just is always goes well.
I certainly think it is, in terms of out of the biggest names to get. It's one that makes a lot of sense to be on Apple's platform, just in terms of, as you say, the type of stuff that she does. I myself most likely won't be watching her shows just because I don't currently, but I certainly do remember a lot from growing up, seeing her show on TV all the time. So I certainly appreciate the fact that she's on there. I think it's a big win for Apple. It's a big thing to help launch the subscription service, or whatever form it is when it comes out. And as opposed to the Couple Karaoke, Planet of the Apps approach, where they're kind of here's 2 new shows, I am more thinking that, okay, not in September, most likely next year, and it's going to be here's a list of shows, here's a list of original, it's not here's 3 new shows, it's going to be here's 12 new shows or something.
Yeah, it's not going to be 24-hour programming.
No.
But it definitely will be like, a nightly thing to watch. That's what I think. Like, you'll at least have a few shows a day to watch.
And it will help make the TV app more compelling. That's one of the things I had on my WWDC wish list. And yeah, if you're putting original content in there, it's only going to make people actually use the app more.
Do you use it much?
I think I also stated this in the wishlist episode, but I use it basically just to pick up off of where I recently was in terms of whatever kids shows were playing. So they're like, they'll be like, oh, hey, you want to watch Peppa Pig? And I'll just go straight to the TV app, and I don't even go into it. I just like hover over it and then choose one of the recently played shows that sits above it on that home row.
All of my TV watching experience is through the Apple TV. That's the only channel that I'm only on the HDMI port that it has my Apple TV. And I'd say a third of my TV watching is actually through the Apple TV app, a third through Netflix, and maybe a third through YouTube. So it definitely features for like all of my 10-play content, SBS, all of that. I just go straight through the TV app. So I love it.
I appreciate it. I do like it when I go in there. The reason I just don't go in there enough is basically, say, any shows that my wife and I watch together are usually within Netflix, or it's a movie rental through iTunes. And so they're the two places we immediately go. And then I have my own shows that I watch through ABC iView, etc., all that sort of stuff that I watch separately, and I'll watch that on my phone or MacBook or whatever. So it's kind of like I know where I want to go. So I'm not really sitting down and being like, I want to discover something new. I know the TV app is there for that purpose. I just haven't sort of taken the initiative to think that's where I should go. But yeah, it exists for a reason, and this will be a good way to boost it.
What else will they be bringing?
Are you sleeping?
Well, I'm not now. I'm podcasting.
Yeah. There's a psychological thriller book called Are You Sleeping? So I'm not too much of a reader these days, but I'm big into psychological thrillers. And so this basically explores the obsessions with true crime stories. It'll feature big names like Octavia Spencer, Lizzie Kaplan, and Aaron Paul, mostly famous in Breaking Bad as Jesse Pinkman. So I think when we were discussing our podcast listening, you said that you're into the true crime podcast. Is that right?
Definitely. I definitely listen to quite a few. Real Crime Profile, but definitely the best podcast for true crime is Sword and Scale, but it is pretty dark. So yeah, I'm pretty keen on it. Interestingly, the guy who does that has just been signed for a TV show. So I'm quite interested to one day compare whatever Apple has here. It was based on a book, right? But it is their production and the production quality. So I will be keen to compare that experience with my weekly true crime podcast, which interestingly, I think the demographic for true crime is predominantly female.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this might also help, just diversify their shows.
That makes sense. Not that I'm saying that there's any link between crimes and females or anything, but that makes sense in the way that I know that, okay, so my wife's part of a book club and they recommend books and share and discuss all that sort of stuff. And so many of the ones they read have some sort of true crime factor to it. So I know that is popular on a book level. It's huge. True crime is huge in the podcast, like massive in the podcast game. Any podcast groups I'm part of, people are just always posting about, hey, have you listened to this, listen to this, true crime, amazing. So it is huge. So it's actually funny because this is kind of like based on a book that looks at people being obsessed with true crimes. So yeah, sounds kind of wacky. I will certainly give it a go. So I like the cast lineup in it. I'm interested in psychological thrillers. That's good. So you have Oprah, you have Are You Sleeping? And then there's a list of other stuff which kind of displays the diversity they're going with in terms of this original content. So you've got huge names like Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon signed on for a drama. You've got a new animated series by the Bob's Burgers creator, which is a big one for me because I love Bob's Burgers. There's a dramedy called Little Voices, which has 10 episodes locked in. That'll be exec produced by J.J. Abrams, another huge name, and Sarah Bareilles. I hadn't heard of her, but yeah, worth checking out her work. A coming of age comedy with Haley Steinfeld called Dickinson, so I'll definitely give that a go. A sci-fi drama from the Peaky Blinders writer Stephen Knight called C.
I'll definitely be watching that.
Yes, because I was instantly thinking of you when I was writing down the notes for that, because I know that at least based on your Twitter activity that you and Michelle are fans of that show. A sci-fi from the co-creators of Lost and Tron Legacy called Amazing Stories. So this was that tie-in with. There's a lot of talk between Amazing Stories and it being with Spielberg, so I'm assuming he's still involved. I was a little bit unclear as to what happened there. And there's a best-selling novel called Shantaram, which they're going to do an adaptation of. So already you've kind of got. Yeah, you've got dramas, you've got animation, you've got comedies, you've got different age brackets, you've got Oprah, you've got thrillers. It's looking a lot more compelling than Planet of the Apps and Carpool Karaoke.
Yeah, it's certainly, it's certainly casting the net quite wide, which I think is fantastic. I would like to just clarify that just because I admire and respect Oprah does not necessarily mean that I'll be watching every episode. I'll definitely try out every single one of these shows, or at least that's my intention going in. I remember with the Beats One announcement, between when it was announced and actually launched, I envisioned that I would listen to Beats One every single day, that I would catch every one of Zane Lowe's shows, and that clearly never materialized. But with the TV shows, I think they're more manageable to catch, at least the pilot episode of each, because, you're not actually, it's not daily and you're not missing out to the point where you can't catch up. Having said that, I do like Beats One, specifically Julie's my favorite. So when I do get around to listening to it, I try and catch her show anyway.
Yeah, I was actually, initially I just associated Beats One with mainstream music, Zane Lowe, etc., all that sort of thing. So I was like, that's good, is, speaking to a mass audience, full well knowing that I was probably not going to get into that. But then with the little Beats One spin-offs of all these different people have their own shows, you got a huge name to me, such as Corey Taylor from Stone Sour and Slipknot. He has his own Beats One channel on, and it's awesome. And I was like, this is great. It's not just targeting like more mainstream genres, which I then actually later on found out that through Beats One Zane Lowe, and that he was actually supporting and playing bands of all sorts of genres. I sort of initially had it in my head before I knew anything about him that was going to be, hip hop and pop and R&B. That's what I had as my preconceived idea. So it was a nice discovery to see that it was a lot broader than that, and then to actually go into the Apple Music app and into that section and see all these other shows in there. I was like, yeah, this is cool.
Yeah, they have something, I think, for almost every taste. They have a show for like the South African house music guy, who Michelle and I obviously know quite well. So they have like a wide variety of music that is available. And Zane specifically, obviously coming from mainstream radio, there is a perception that he would most likely like pop music. But he's one of those few people that you get a lot of people that say, I like all kinds of music. I think Zane Lowe is one of the only people that I could truly believe when he says that, because you can just sense his like passion for all kinds of music when he does his show. But yeah, I don't get to listen to it that often, but when I do, it's certainly quite good.
Coming back to the TV stuff, what I like about this is that I don't think I'm going to get the issue of being bombarded with too much to choose from, like your Netflix situation. You get into Netflix and there's new show, this, catch up on this, continue this, and it's all kind of like, it's hard enough to kind of like dig through all of that and find a show that, say, both myself and my wife will both like, or see anything that looks interesting. So I see something like, I want to watch that. She's like, no, that looks crap. And, this is a constant issue, right? Whereas I think something like this, they're building content for a diverse range of shows, age brackets, etc. And it'll sort of be a lot easier to actually see what's presented. Like, I don't think they're going to be pushing the volume that Netflix does. I don't know if you've had that issue on like a Netflix level, but
not particularly.
Yeah. But anyway, it's sort of like having a bit more of a concise range rather than an overload. That's kind of like a bit of a breath of fresh air, if you will. That's how I'm feeling like the approach to this will be. So it's good. I'm interested to see it.
It'll be good.
Wrapping up with some edible extras. Now, you're living that beta life. Is there anything that you've discovered or that hasn't been discussed that you found out?
Not particularly.
Like you
I'll just
found out that
mention
little Safari thing.
Yes, I'll mention that. But I've just installed the Mojave beta yesterday, so I'll definitely be able to give my feedback on that at a future point. Obviously, I don't use my Mac that often, but I immediately chose dark mode as the setup. So it's not buried in settings. As soon as you set up, it says dark or light mode, straight into dark mode, and I am loving it.
Cool.
I'm not sure how I would feel about, like, I know I enjoy dark mode apps on iOS, but I don't know how I would enjoy it like permanently. So we'll see. But yes, I'm loving it so far and works well. Obviously, I pointed out my major issue with my watch, but that was all sorted. And then one of the corner case things I found, as you mentioned, I love having lots of tabs and, like, you know, starting at one point, like, for example, I read a professional blog. It's actually like a collection. It's a blog aggregator. And so I'll open a lot of tabs from that page. And then, you know, when you, in the old iOS versions, when you open a new tab from a link, it basically kills the whole history for that tab. So you're not able to go back, and, you know, it just kills that connection. Whereas now, if it does allow you to go back, and pressing back closes the new tab and takes you back to the tab, your source tab, which I think is excellent. I haven't tested out what would happen if in the interim you reverted, like you went back to the original tab and changed something. Like, what would it do then? But yes, it's fantastic. I think that is just like attention to detail that I really appreciate. And
because I'm pretty sure the other browsers, you open a link in a new tab and that's it. It's just dedicated to that. I don't think it has that same functionality that you're discussing.
Yeah, this is a first. Yeah,
that's what I thought. Because I've always remembered that anytime I think, you know, link a new tab, I'm like, okay, well, that's just its own singular place, you know. And then once you're done with it, you have to close it off, sort of thing. So yeah, try that out. Try out the little, you know, original tab. Head back, see what happens. But it sounds like a handy little thing that you've discovered.
Yep, definitely. So, I'm keen to obviously keep playing around. I'm keen for the next beta to come out. I'm actually expecting it in the next couple of days. Maybe I'm a bit optimistic, but you know, here's hoping.
Did they say when the public beta is expected?
No, they didn't mention it at all. So yeah,
I am tempted to. I'm not sure about the iPhone yet, but I'll probably install it on the Air 2. Considering I don't have the iPad Pro, because it didn't arrive, and I'll possibly have to wait another few months. But
yeah,
it's the risk. It's the risk.
Yeah, it's worthwhile at least just checking out some stuff. Like, obviously, if you sold your iPad, it's not core to your, you know, current functionality, and this is. But I just go from, like, you know, maybe beta 2 or 3. But yeah,
you know what is ridiculous is I got the iPad Pro. I got the Apple Pencil. I sort of played around with it a little bit, but didn't sort of do, you know, as much as I envisioned, because I thought, okay, I want to set aside some time and sort of work on a drawing or something like that. And it's not until I've sold the iPad Pro, still got the Apple Pencil, that just yesterday I was like, oh, cool. You know, my friend did this drawing challenge thing, and I was like, oh, cool. It's a good reason to get back into it. So I did that, full well knowing that I have to use the older iPad and that the Apple Pencil does not work with the Air 2. So it's like, by the time I actually need to use the Apple Pencil, I can't. So I was actually so tempted last night to just order the education.
That's actually
event iPad.
It's not a horrible idea because I don't think that you'd lose that much value. Like, if you're okay to wait, I'm speaking pretty generally here, not specifically you, but like if you're okay to wait 3 months or another 6 months for that, iPad Pro, like, and you really just want basic functionality with Apple Pencil, that education iPad is a fantastic deal because you'd at least be able to get $350 back for it. And then you've paid like, $25 a month to use an iPad. It's not that bad.
Yeah, because the issue I had is the only way I could use some form of stylus was that one that I reviewed many, many episodes ago that has a little disc-style tip on the end. And I was just like, full well knowing what the Apple Pencil was like, I was like, oh man, I really wish I had my iPad Pro right now. But oh well, we'll see what happens. I'll either cave and get an iPad or I'll cave and install the public beta. So yeah, one of the two. We're just going to wrap this up with, Siri Shortcuts. The Shortcuts app isn't out yet, as we know. I'm really excited to try it out when it does come. But supposedly the Shortcuts logo was stolen. So there's a company called Shift that use blockchain tech to create websites, and they're suing Apple for $200,000, stating that Apple stole their Shortcuts app icon. Now, looking at the two and full well living in a design world, living in a world where I have to create icons and create logos, I'm like, they're really... It's pretty far-fetched that they're trying to take Apple to court over something that has similar-ish colors, but the shapes itself are quite different. And then what's even funnier with that is there's a company called SetApp whose icon looks so much more like a mirror, like a duplicate version of Shift's icon. It's like, well, why aren't they taking SetApp to court?
Yeah, because SetApp can't pay them $200,000.
Exactly. And then so now it's kind of like, if nothing eventuates from this, X amount of people have now actually heard of Shift. Like, I'd never heard of them before. I'd assume that you probably had never heard of them. So they've gained some exposure, and everyone's kind of laughing at them, being like, well, no. I mean, as I said, with... it's kind of like with music, right? So people are like, oh, this sounds just like this band. It's like, well, there's only so much new musical genres that can be created, right? Like, something always has influence from something else. Same with design. The more logos that are created in history, the more businesses that are created, the more similarities you're going to find between things. And just their claim there it's just so laughable to me.
It's ridiculous. Like, it's not even worth giving them, attention. They're just looking for attention. They are trying to milk Apple, and as you mentioned, there's actually a really good podcast. I'll plug another podcast, TED Radio Hour, which talks about creativity and how nothing is actually original anymore, which is, it's worthwhile listening to, at least in that context of, well, every idea is built on another one, and, there will be overlap because there's only so many things to go around. And so, especially with, as you mentioned, in design, where you have limited colors and limited space, things are going to overlap at some point, and you did not necessarily get copied.
Exactly. And the funnier fact to that is I'm pretty sure it turns out that SetApp existed for a year longer than Shift anyway, so SetApp should take Shift.
Yes, that would be
anyway. All right, that wraps up episode 53 of Apple Slice. Apple Slice is part of the Ozcast network. If you want to check out us and plenty of other fantastic Australian podcasts, go to auscastnetwork.com. If you'd like to subscribe, you can find us in your player, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Breaker, Stitcher, Spotify, and plenty of other players. We're also on social media, Nick.
Yep, you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. We also have a Facebook group, Australian Apple Fans, which is linked to our Facebook page. You just search Apple Slice in each one of those, and I'm sure we will come up.
Cool. And finally, before we cap this off, anything else to add?
Not today. No lost drones.
Yeah, and no returning drones either. So,
no.
Okay, all right. It's good been having a chat. we'll basically see what happens with the betas if a public beta comes out in the next week or so. And yeah, I'll catch you in the next episode.
All right, bye.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.